For almost 20 years, Brook's backstory has been the final piece of the Straw Hat puzzle that Oda's refused to hand over to us. We have a bit of a broad outline that he's a musician, he had a crew that died around him, and 50 years he had spent alone as a skeleton in the fog of the Florian Triangle. But little did we know that while Loki was trading blows with Imu, the ruler of the world, and the whole island of Elbaf was on fire, Oda was going to casually reveal additional details about Brook. Chapters 1183 to 1186 reveal to us key details about Brook's backstory before he became a skeleton. Brook's backstory is so intense that it's no wonder that he buried all memory of it in order to convince himself that it never happened. But you know which One Piece characters aren't hiding away from the memory of their past? These are the individuals who are subscribed to the channel. Only 10% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy this One Piece content and want to see more, then hit the bell icon and the subscribe button. By chapter 1183, Brook and Usopp have both been pretty much hospitalized by Imu. This was while he was possessing Gunko's body. When the crew wonder whether if Gunko is an enemy from Brook's past, he reveals that she isn't an enemy, but he also doesn't want to see her again. Brook's angry reaction leads to a lot of confusion, because if Gunko is who Brook thinks that she is, then she should be 77 years old, but yet she hasn't aged a single day. While Gunko is still locked in Loki's ice and Jinbei tells him plainly he has to decide soon whether if she lives or dies, Brook wonders that he just can't leave her there because mid-possession she freed him from her own arrows and begged him to run. He has seen Gunko flicker her personality between three types: a sneering celestial dragon, a demon under Imu's control, and someone underneath both of these personalities who knew Brook's face. To explain why Brook is struggling to decide whether if Gunko lives or dies, he takes the crew back 90 years in the past. Esperia was a West Blue kingdom built top to bottom around music. Imagine streets that are lined with shops that craft every instrument imaginable. There's a grand opera house, a harbour called Siloport moving instruments by the crate, and a theatre street running up to the opera with a colossal harp built into the castle as the heart of the skyline. The road to fame in Esperia was talent. Oda's packed several real-world nods to Esperia. The title comes from Hesperia, the old Greek word for the Western Lands. So Brook's homeland is literally the Western land dropped into the West Blue. There's an Austria connection too. Hesperia means Western Lands, while Austria comes from a word meaning the exact opposite, Eastern Lands. So the name is a bit of an inverse nod to the Austria country. Oda once said in an SBS that if One Piece was set on Earth, Brook would be Austrian. This is the land of Mozart, Beethoven, and the kingdom's Baroque look seems modelled on Salzburg, which is Mozart's birthplace. Meanwhile, King Reuven is basically Beethoven wearing a crown. His name is a squashed reading of Beethoven's full name in Japanese. The first thing Brook says about the music-drenched place of Esperia is that it's gone. This is the same term that is used in the way that you describe places that the world government erases. These are locations in the world that they want forgotten. 90 years ago, Brook was born at the very bottom of Esperia, and the king on the throne at the time was a tyrant who didn't care whether if his poorest subjects lived or died. Unfortunately, Brook's family didn't survive, as his parents and his brother all starved to death while the kingdom congratulated itself on being lovely. At the age of 11, Brook is living alone in a coastline junkyard with a pack of stray dogs. He watches the other children file into music school through the windows, cradling real instruments, while he scratches away on a violin that he built out of scrap. And by his own admission, he was awful at playing this instrument. The other kids ran him off because he reeked of the dump, and the townsfolk called him a stain on the kingdom. He'd sit there and sing that the king was to blame for it all, which with his family in the ground from starvation was pretty accurate. Then a strange man starts turning up at the junkyard to hear Brook play, and Brook, who is 11 and short on fans, assumes that the guy just likes music. He has no clue he's talking to Prince Reuven. He's been slipping out of the palace dressed as a commoner to see how his people actually live. Reuven takes the time to listen to this scrawny kid who is playing away on a garbage violin, and he's enjoying it, which is more than anyone else in the kingdom has ever offered to Brook. To mark the friendship between them, Brook cooks a meal. He serves Reuven a stew of frog and grasshoppers seasoned with curry powder swiped off the marine ships in the pot. He swears that this curry powder makes anything taste like curry. As Reuven takes the bowl, he thinks about his own life, the tiny fancy portions at the palace that he has, the prestigious women that are just lined up to be his wife. He compares this to the starving boy who's just offered him a bowl of boiled insects out of kindness. It's no secret the food is vile and Reuven eats all of it anyway because Brook made it for him, and he even refuses payment from Prince Reuven. From there on, the two of them start spending real time together fishing and singing, without Brook knowing that he was becoming good friends with royalty. When Brook goes back for more curry powder from the marine ship, the marines grab him as they decide that he's a drug courier for the Molon family. Now they find nothing on him aside from the curry powder, which makes them angrier as they beat him in a warehouse, and since he's now a witness to what they've done, they decide they're going to kill Brook. In chapter 1184, the 11-year-old Brook is certain that he's about to die as he starts singing. He thinks that singing will make dying quicker and gentler. It's the same song that he had sung that morning out of joy. Its lyrics are about how in the end all any of us leave behind is bones. The title is We're All Bones When We Die. It's the same thread that runs through the Binks no Sake song. Before the Marines can finish him off, Reuven crashes in with Kandel and the battle convoy. He learns his quiet fishing buddy is actually the prince, and that the prince fights with twin rapiers, cutting down a warehouse of corrupt Marines without breaking a sweat. When Reuven's men warn him that these Marines answer to the world government, Reuven states he doesn't care. A report even reaches them that the real Molon courier has been caught, proving Brook's innocence outright, but Reuven was never going to let it slide either way. He says a world that shields scum like this is already ending. Reuven takes Brook back to the palace, patches him up and apologizes for hiding who he was to him, as he admits that he was just having too much fun to risk ruining it with the truth. He then reveals that he's going to look after Brook, as he's going to give him a real bed to sleep on, real instruments to play, a place at the musical school, and a promise that Brook will become Esperia's newest star. Understandably, Brook begins to weep at this first act of true kindness that he's seen in his life. On Reuven's orders, Brook becomes Kandel's page, and she's handed the job of beating manners into him. It goes badly at first because he's Brook, so the panty jokes start very young, and when he asks Kandel to show him hers, she hits him and promises to teach him etiquette through pain. There's a really sweet exchange where she admits there's a man that she loves who's far above her, and the reason she mastered the blade in the first place is just to stay at his side. Under the comedy, Kandel is the one who shapes Brook. She trains him in swordsmanship herself, drills etiquette into him, and teaches him that strength and manners weigh the same. This is a lesson that he keeps for the rest of his life. Kandel was a serious figure in her own right. She's the former captain of the battle convoy before she married into royalty, and Oda modeled her on Oscar from The Rose of Versailles, a anime manga series from the 70s. To the kingdom of Esperia, she was a saint. To Brook, she became the measure for everything, including the woman that he'd pine over for the rest of his life. He later tells Princess Shuri straight out that both her parents are why he climbed out of that junkyard. Reuven gave him a future, while Kandel gave him the discipline to earn it, and this debt that he feels like he owes to them drives everything that he does next. By the age of 20, Brook is unrecognizable from his child self. He's now leading the Raider Squad, on track to captain the whole battle convoy. This is the post that Kandel once held. He's close enough to the royals to openly declare his feelings for the queen in front of the king and live to tell about it. King Reuven predictably takes Brook's love for his wife as proof of an assassination plot to steal her, and he half-jokingly threatens him with execution for conspiracy. Brook denies any such plan, though he does nothing to help his case by cheerfully admitting he'd be happy to court Kandel once Reuven dies of natural causes. Unfortunately, the music that Brook played during this time was still pretty rough, as his early morning rehearsals annoyed half of the island. Chapter 1183 reveals his fighting style for the first time. He'd run into the Molon family at Silo Port that morning and cut them all with his quick draw, except his cuts don't land right away. The gangsters ride through town perfectly fine, heading for the opera house to snatch Kandel, while Reuven and Shuri beg Brook to do something. He calmly explains he already did, and right on cue every gangster drops at once as the delayed slash finally catches up to them. them. Kandel strolls out of the opera to cheers, and we learn that she and Brook were the two biggest stars in the whole kingdom. Then there's Princess Shuri. From the time that she's a small girl with a permanently runny nose, she is smitten with Brook. He trains her with the sword himself, and he teaches her we're all bones when we die, and tells her his dream of becoming a pirate, even hitting the exact pose that fans will clock as the Nika pose. As a kid, she even had her own little laugh. She loved Brook so much that she offered to marry him when she grew up, a offer he quickly turned down because her nose was still running, much to Reuven's fury. Oda then takes us 7 years into the future to chapter 1184. Now Shuri is 14, stories of her beauty have spread far enough that 5 princes come asking for her hand, but she beats every one of them in a duel and announces she has no time for weaklings or men who can't play music. Brook, who's now 27, mostly just scolds her for being crude about how she's grown before turning to ask some noblewoman for their panties, earning a thrown sword for his trouble. There's a small detail in their training which pays off horribly later. He notes that Shuri fights as if she can briefly see into the future, an early read on the kind of talent that she really has. Feeling like Brook only values her as her parents' daughter, Shuri asks if he'd save her if she were in danger. He says yes, as she pushes harder, as she says, "It's only because I'm the king and queen's child, right?" Brook pauses, then he tells her that he'd save her because of who she is. The pause stings her and she's only soothed by a piece of candy. While Brook was a teenager under Kandel, a ship of world nobles washed up on Esperia, and the kingdom bent over backwards to keep them comfortable. It's the way that every nation does when celestial dragons appear. One of them was a god knight named Manmaya Guro. Shortly after they leave, Kandel is described as bedridden from fatigue caused by dealing with the nobles, and she's out of action for months. Now this is a cover story. What actually happened is that Kandel fell pregnant with Guro's child during that visit, and the exhaustion excuse explained why the captain of the battle convoy suddenly vanished for months. Over the next 2 years, she recovers and finally marries Reuven, whose coronation conveniently lands at the same moment as the wedding, very likely to get ahead of any awkward question about the timing. Then Shuri is born and presented to the kingdom as Reuven's daughter. So when a young Shuri asks whether if Brook would save her even if she weren't the king and queen's child, the cruel joke is that she already isn't the king's daughter. Her real father is a god knight who stepped off a ship, left a baby behind and sailed away. Kandel carries this secret to her grave, as Reuven may or may not have known this, and Brook spent years teaching a world noble to hold a sword without the faintest idea of who she was. Everything here so far is the good half of Brook's backstory. When Shuri is 15, a strange mist rolls into Esperia and it settles there for 6 months, as it starts eating the kingdom's instruments. A nation whose entire economy runs on music watches its instruments rot away. Then the mist thickens into a toxic smog, as it turns fatal with people falling ill, hundreds die, and the kingdom loses the ability to sing and play music at all. Among the dead is Queen Kandel. Her death gutted the kingdom of Esperia, and it shattered Princess Shuri. We're not told explicitly where this mist had come from, but you can guarantee that it isn't natural. A kingdom that the world government wants something from ends up being choked by a fog that destroys its only source of income before it becomes deadly. The collapse of Esperia hits roughly 62 to 63 years ago, the same time window that Loki was born on Elbaf and a young Charlotte Linlin was abandoned there. Oda links the death of Brook's kingdom to the history of the island where the story is being told. The heavenly tribute to the world nobles comes due and the kingdom has nothing to offer, so the government offers a compromise: pay in people instead. They want 1,000 citizens shipped to Merijo as slaves. King Reuven, who knows that slavery under the celestial dragons is a fate worse than death, refuses outright and he declares war on the world government. With 2 months before the armada arrives, the citizens begin to panic and Brook lifts their spirit with music the same way that it had always lifted him. He's dreaming of becoming a pirate and Shuri begs him to join his future crew, but he turns her down every time because his loyalty is to the king first. The government never wanted 1,000 slaves. What they actually demanded was Shuri herself. The world noble child returned to Merijo and Reuven refused to hand his daughter over. He invented the slave story in order to rally his troops and his people, letting his entire kingdom prepare to die in a war which was at its core about protecting one girl that he'd raised as his own. 2 months later, the world government arrives and Esperia falls, as the fleet is overwhelming. The battle convoy is outnumbered into irrelevance, as the country goes up in flames and Brook is seen fighting alone, carving through marines until word reaches him that the palace has been breached. He cuts his way to the throne room to protect the family that he owes everything to, and what he finds is the image which will forever haunt him. Shuri, with demonic eyes glowing, is standing there over Reuven's corpse, and Reuven's body is wrong too. It's marked with horns and wings. Looming over both of them are a massive bird-shaped shadow and a second figure. Before Brook is able to speak, the demonic Shuri turns and tells him the war is over now, and he should be glad. In chapter 1186, we learn the bird shadow is in fact Imu, possessing the Gorosei Marcus Mars. During this chapter, Brook refuses to accept that Reuven is dead. He runs to the body screaming for a medic, begging his friend to hold on. Imu, still wearing Mars, calmly shuts the door and calls this an inconvenient interruption. While Shuri tells Brook flatly that Reuven is gone, Brook draws on the second figure, demanding to know who he is and what he's done to Shuri, because he's known this girl since the day that she was born and he refuses to believe that she'd do this. Then Shuri tells Brook the truth that she had only just learned. She is the child of a world noble, and Reuven was never her real father. When Brook insists that she's still Reuven's rightful heir, she throws it back. There's no proof, and she feels she's wasted 16 years living in an ignorance of who she really is. And Reuven lied about the slaves. The nobles wanted her, not 1,000 people, and she condemns him for letting his whole kingdom die to shield one person. Which is why she says she killed Reuven to end the war for good, despite knowing that it will leave Esperia in a ruin. The second figure speaks. He's a god knight named Manmio Guro, and he recalls Brook as Candel's old page. When Brook looks at Guro's eyes, they're mismatched. Each of them are different colors, exactly like Shuri's. This realization that Guro is her biological father knocks Brook backwards. Guro explains that he wouldn't normally cross an ocean for a child, but these bipolar irises are rare and prized by Imu. He starts to say he never managed to awaken a certain ability himself, but that perhaps Shuri can, before Imu silences him mid-sentence. So those eyes are a mystery that Oda is dangling over us on purpose. The closest comparison is Charlotte Pudding's third eye, another extremely rare trait that has to be awakened and can read poneglyphs. Whatever Shuri's eyes are able to do, Imu wants them badly enough to tear a kingdom apart and wipe her memory to get it. Guro, who is unwilling to leave a witness, orders Shuri to kill Brook too. The technique she drives through his skull is Gavo Leap Forward, the exact lunging thrust that Brook himself taught her. Brook is unable to fight Shuri, so he gives up, allowing her to run her blade through his head. He survives only because the blade threads between his arteries and misses his brainstem, as we finally learn how he got that permanent crack that we've always seen in his skull. His men find him and bandage him, and when they confirm Reuven is dead and Shuri has sailed off on a government ship, Brook breaks completely and goes catatonic. The shutdown is the same reaction that Oda gave him once before, when he learned Laboon had survived back in chapter 486. Shuri was taken to Merijo, her memories were erased and she was renamed to be Gunko, eventually rising to serve Imu directly as a full god knight, with the title that should turn your stomach given what we just watched, as she's called the father-killing princess. When Brook finishes the story, he admits something that the crew needed to hear. Back then, he didn't know devil fruits existed, and what he saw, the demon features, the horns, the wings, it was so impossible that he convinced himself that it was a hallucination born of shock, and he buried this as something that his broken mind invented. Only now, after watching his giant allies on Elbaf get turned into demons in front of him, has he started to reconsider what he actually saw in that throne room. Brook's life is 3 losses stacked on top of each other. His birth family starved when he was a child, his chosen family in Esperia, and his crew, the Rumbar pirates. Each time he was left alone at the end, but Esperia is the one that he never revisits. So why is Oda revealing all of this during the Elbaf arc? The parallels to the island are impossible to miss. We just watched King Harold of Elbaf turned into a weapon against his own people through Imu's covenant. His body moved on its own until Loki was forced to mercy kill his father, and the whole nation branded Loki a monster for 6 years, not knowing Harold had begged for the death. Now hold Esperia next to this as Brook walks into the throne room at the very end and he sees Shuri standing over the body. So he drew the obvious conclusion conclusion and hated her for the rest of his life. But what's easy to miss is that Shuri and Reuven were both demonized that day, and the way the scene is framed, the two of them were forced to fight each other, it seems, with Shuri left to land the killing blow. Demonized Shuri insists it was her own choice, that she did it to end the war, except we have just watched on this very island exactly what Imu's covenant does to a person's will. If her story is similar with Loki's, then Shuri didn't choose to kill Reuven, similar to how Loki didn't choose to kill Harold. They were both forced to do that, it seems. This also feeds directly into the present, because the connection between them never faded. We've already seen the real Shuri surface once, when a child who was crying out for his father shook loose her buried memories, and her bond with Brook cracked Imu's grip long enough for her to free the Straw Hats and beg Brook to run. The flashback ends with Brook asking whether if he can put his faith in Gunko being a victim in all of this, and whether if the crew will help him save her. Every one of them agrees on the spot, and Brook bolts off ahead of them to crack the ice. And that's all of Brook's backstory, which was revealed during the Elbaf arc. Now that you know the full story of Esperia, what are your thoughts about why Shuri killed Reuven? Did she do this of her own free will, or was she demonized and forced into it the same way that Harold's body was taken over and being controlled? And what do you think is the significance of the bipolar eyes that are possessed by the Manmeyer bloodline? Do continue the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next One Piece video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.